At 6:31 p.m. The chandeliers in the Palmer House ballroom shimmered, looking like a sky full of trapped stars. The city of Chicago, all polished and perfumed and pretending, held its breath without even knowing why. The charity gala buzzed with men in tuxedos and women wearing borrowed jewels, with city officials who practiced their smiles in elevators, and wives who analyzed their husbands' tells. A string quartet sawed sweetness into the air. Glasses clinked. Cameras flashed. Money changed hands disguised as charity. And then a girl carrying a tray said four quiet words that froze the entire room. Sarah Johnson had no idea she was walking toward the most dangerous family in the city. She didn't know that the man seated near the stage, with silver hair swept back and a black suit cut in an old-world style, was Salvatore Rosi, the Sicilian patriarch whose approval could build a skyline, and whose disapproval could erase a person as easily as chalk in the rain. She was thinking about table numbers and the blister in her new shoes, the way the starched collar scratched her neck, and how tips turned into rent like magic if her hands didn't shake. She pivoted, balanced 5 flutes of champagne, and when an older man waved for her attention, his hands steady but his fingers trembling slightly, Sarah's mouth acted before her fear could. "Sarah, buonasera," she said. Even the quartet forgot its next note. The words were soft, not a performance, not like the ones you see on TV. Her vowels carried that gentle salt of the island, her consonants warmed by kitchen steam and church steps. It wasn't textbook Italian. It was Sicilian, as intimate as a family table. The greeting hung in the air, the kind that belonged in doorways where daughters kissed foreheads and men put down their burdens because a home had absorbed them. Sal Rossi's eyelids lifted. For the first time that evening, the old iron in him eased. Across from him, Giovanni Rosi, 32, with a perfectly knotted tie and a watchful face like a moon made of brushed steel, looked up from a conversation he wasn't enjoying and saw the reason the room had gone quiet. The waitress was slim, blonde, not flashy, with eyes that analyzed without meaning to. She wore her hair in a careful twist that spoke of professionalism, but a strand had escaped and curved at her temple, like an accent mark. He saw details the way other men saw horizons. The faint red line on her wrist where an elastic band had snapped earlier, the small scar near her knuckle, a burn almost healed, the posture trained by please and thank you and by not being seen. And he saw his father's smile, small and private, the kind he used to reserve for Sunday lunches, for music played on vinyl, for something he recognized as his own. "Where did you learn that?" Sal asked, the Sicilian shaping his English, like velvet over stone. Sarah's heart stumbled. She hadn't meant to reveal herself. The phrase had leapt from her memory, old recordings, a neighbor who became family for a season of her life. "From a friend," she said, studying the tray. "From someone who taught me to listen." Giovanni stood. Protocol rumbled in the bones of the men nearby, bodyguards straightening without moving. Anthony Marino, the underboss, was smiling like a host whose party had just gained a new trick. Giovanni reached for a flute to lift the weight from her hand, and when his fingers brushed the stem, the glass didn't tremble. Hers still didn't either. That interested him. "Grazie, signorina," he said softer, his eyes glinting. "You said it right." Sarah nodded. She didn't curtsy. She didn't flee. She placed the last flute, and as she turned, the quartet remembered the note it had lost, and the room's pulse resumed. Only it beat a half-second slower now, as if recalibrating around a new center. She had made the city's most untouchable men feel something human by accident. Back in the service corridor, the air changed. No perfume, just bleach and hot dishwater. Sarah leaned her head against the walk-in cooler door and let the cool steel steal the heat from her cheeks. "Stupid," she scolded herself. "Rule 1, blend. Rule 2, never draw a circle around yourself." But those 4 words had climbed out of her like birds out of a tree. And now, somewhere in that gold room, a pivot had happened. A hinge had turned. "Hey!" Nina, her fellow server, slid beside her, her hip bumping Sarah's. "Did you just kiss the ring in Hobbit language or something?" The music actually stopped. Sarah laughed once, a small glass bell sound. It was hello in a dialect. "Well, you're hello," just got noticed by those people. Nina's voice dropped, a warning disguised as gossip. The Rossis, please don't develop a death wish on my shift. I won't, Sarah said, and meant it. She didn't have room in her budget for dying. Rent, medicine for Mrs. Duca upstairs when her arthritis screamed, a stack of community college forms on Sarah's nightstand, blank except for the part where you promise you'll be able to pay somehow. When she pushed back through the door with a tray of canapes, she felt eyes track her as if her name had been spoken. She didn't look for the source. Professionals don't look back. But he did. Giovanni tracked movement like a chess player watches the edge of the board. The waitress slipped the room's geometry into new angles. Not a threat, not a pawn, something stranger, a piece he hadn't seen before that could change how the endgame looked. Anthony leaned in, his voice pitched for intimacy. Cute, harmless. Send her flowers or send her home. Either way, the show goes on. That's your advice? Giovanni asked without looking at him. Flowers or exile? Anthony grinned. Depends on the flowers. Giovanni's eyes skimmed the entrance where Detective Claire Whitaker had just stepped in. Her hair in a clean bob, her suit saying, I will outwork you. Fundraisers were her favorite field. Criminals loved photo ops. She wasn't there for the charity. She was there for him. Their eyes touched, cool and polite. History tucked away like a folded letter in a drawer. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. He returned his attention to his father, whose color looked better than an hour ago. You look good, he told Sal, which inside their family meant, stay with me. Something about how a person says hello, Sal murmured. You forget you are a person. Then someone reminds you. Giovanni followed the line of his father's gaze and found the waitress moving through senators and donors like a quiet current under bright boats. She carried stories he didn't know yet. He didn't like not knowing, but he liked the feeling, brief as the blink between notes, that his father had been warmed. A photographer appeared, popping light like a magician's trick, and the evening resumed its choreography. Speeches, soft applause, the auction paddle rising in a hand that betrayed no strain. Sarah fell into rhythm. By dessert, she had nearly convinced herself that nothing had shifted, that words evaporate and leave no scent. Then the first gunshot cracked the ceiling of sound. It wasn't inside the ballroom. The security detail knew that instantly. The echo was wrong, hollowed by distance, too sharp for the carpeted acoustics. Came from the alley, a warning strike, the kind of punctuation men use when they want to be read. Sarah froze, a dessert plate suspended midair. Screams swelled, controlled at the edges by the quiet hands of men who live near violence and do not wish to let it breed. Giovanni's eyes cut to the nearest guard. Back, he said, and the guard moved toward Sal with a sway that only looked like walking. Anthony's phone was already in his palm, his thumb moving, his smile refusing to drop. Claire Whitaker had her badge out and her body aligned with the door, counting exits, outputs, lies. Sarah's instinct said, down, then listen. She slid behind a column and let the tablecloth turn her invisible. The second shot didn't come. Instead, a motorcycle engine revved, taunting, then faded into the artery of State Street. A message had been delivered without ink. Giovanni knew the script. New rivals test old kings, and sometimes they test the sun to taste his mettle. He wanted, with a heat that surprised him, to keep this ugliness out of his father's evening. He also wanted to know who had arranged the orchestra. Sir, Anthony murmured, smoothing his tie that never wrinkled. I'll check the perimeter. You'll stay with my father, Giovanni said and turned. The service corridor air hit him like a different country. He moved fast, smooth. A man used to walking into rooms already decided. Staff flattened to the walls, eyes flitting away. He passed the cooler door, where a faint oval of warmth still marked a forehead that had rested there earlier, and he wondered what kind of life left such small human evidence behind. He found Sarah before he was looking for her. She had gone to the back loading dock because she was practical, because the crash she'd heard wasn't a gunshot but a tray hitting concrete. A busboy stood trembling over the ruin of crystal like a priest at a broken altar. Sarah crouched to help him, her voice low and competent. her hands quick and unbleeding. We'll sweep then mop. Breathe. Nobody died. Giovanni stopped in the doorway and watched her gather sharpness with her bare fingers as if she'd done it all her life, rescuing people from small disasters that felt like big ones. She sensed him before she saw him. Her shoulders adjusted, and then she rose, the tray shards stacked. "Sir," she said, neutral, refusing to be weird about the fact that his suit cost more than her car. "What you said to my father," Giovanni told her. Not many people would know how. She considered him closely. His face was too symmetrical to be handsome, if not for the small ruin at one eyebrow where some old wound had knit imperfectly. It saved him from looking carved by a machine. Not many people would notice. She paused. He looked tired. It seemed kind. The word hardly ever touched this world. He tasted it like a foreign candy. "Do you know who we are? I know you make this city quiet when you want to," she said, not changing her tone. "And sometimes you let it be loud." He should have been offended. Instead, he was amused by how cleanly she drew it. "What's your name?" "Sarah Johnson." "Miss Johnson," he said, and the formality made it sound like a promise. "Tonight, if anyone asks you questions, you didn't hear anything, and you don't know anything." "That's almost always true," she said, "except that I heard 2 motorcycle tires and a man who likes being watched." Giovanni's head tilted. "You notice things. I carry plates in rooms where people say things they shouldn't." She lifted the bin of glass. He reached to take it. She did not let him. "I've got it. Humor me," he said, and when their fingers touched, an uninvited current ran up both of their arms. They both ignored it the way strangers ignore a spark in a crowded elevator. Politely, privately, promising themselves it meant nothing. On his way back toward the ballroom, he spoke into the air, and men answered from the walls. "Sweep the alley. Pull the feeds. Find the bike. Don't spook the guests. They're already spooked enough by their own mirrors." When the gala limped to a close under the smooth voice of an MC paid to drink panic like a cocktail, Sarah collected last tips and stacked last chairs. She avoided the gold room where the rich shook off fear like glitter. She avoided the loading dock where fear had sounded like glass. "Johnson," the manager intercepted her. "One of the donors asked that you deliver a bottle to his car. I'm off in 5. You're on until he stops paying me," the manager said with the humanity of a spreadsheet. Outside, the night had the brittle chill of early March. Lake wind scraped the sky clean of warmth. Sarah hugged her elbows and followed the curb to the valet stand. The bottle wore a ribbon like a medal. The car waiting was black, long, and disagreeable with anonymity. "Miss Johnson." Giovanni was already at the curb, having slid past the velvet rope of reality like it was his birthright. He opened the back door himself, which she noted because powerful men usually forgot doors had handles. "I'm not getting in that car," she said, and he smiled because fear that tells the truth is a language he respects. "Good," he said, "because you're going in the other one." He nodded to a second vehicle, sleek but less obvious, pulling up behind. "Someone left a message tonight. They don't know you exist. I want to keep it that way. Let me put you in a safe car and drive you 2 blocks. You can tell me to stop where the streetlights work." 2 blocks, she repeated. "My compromise to your independence," he said, and it sounded like he'd made a study of the concept without ever liking the taste. "And my father asked me to say thank you." Sarah looked at the city, at the way the wind shoved newspapers into corners, at the men who pretended they couldn't see the cold. She looked at the valet who had suddenly discovered the deeper mysteries of his podium. She looked at Giovanni's face and did not see pity there, only an engineer's attention. "How do I keep this thing from breaking?" 2 blocks, she said. He opened the door. Inside, the car smelled like leather and rain. He didn't slide in beside her. He took the front passenger seat, telling the driver to keep his hands where hands belonged. The city flowed around them, all glass and angles and old stone shouldering new money. "Who taught you Sicilian?" he asked. "Mrs. Duca," Sarah said, looking out so she didn't have to look at him. "She moved into my building when I was 12. I helped carry her groceries." She paid me in cookies and stories. From where in Sicily? Calanacetta? She said, and his breath hitched one beat, because that was where Sal's mother had laughed once upon a time. She's still alive? He asked quietly. Yes, Sarah said. Most days she is. The 2 blocks ended too soon. Here, Sarah said, indicating the corner with the laundromat that kept odd hours and the bodega that kept odder secrets. The car rolled to a gentle stop, a kindness his drivers rarely offered the brakes. Giovanni turned to face her at last. If anyone asks about tonight, I don't know anything, she said and gave him a small, sincere smile that felt like it would cost nothing and later cost everything. Good night, Mr. Rossi. He should have let her go. Sarah, he said, and used her first name as if it were a private room. If anything feels wrong, you see a car twice that shouldn't be there. A face that doesn't belong, call this number. He handed her a card. It felt heavier than its size should allow. She didn't take it. You can keep the city quiet, she said gently. But you can't own every shadow. That's exactly why you should take it. She did because he wasn't wrong. She slid it into the small inside pocket of her purse, the one she kept for bus passes and prayers. When she climbed the stairs to her apartment later that night, the card burned against her ribs as if it carried its own weather. She paused on the landing outside Mrs. Duca's door and listened. TV murmuring, a kettle complaining, the old woman's voice scolding someone who wasn't there anymore. Sarah knocked softly. It's me, she called. Do you need anything? The door opened a cautious inch. An eye bright as a coin blinked. Figlia mia, Mrs. Duca said, and let her in. The apartment smelled like tomatoes and anise cookies. The past warmed its hands by the present like a beggar at a diner's coffee pot. On the TV, a news crawl whispered about a disturbance near a major downtown event. No names, no edges. On the table, a photograph sat in a tilt-back frame. A younger Mrs. Duca in a summer dress, sunlight burning holes in the picture. Beside her stood a boy with a storm in his eyes and a smile he hadn't learned yet. Who is that? Sarah asked, pointing before she could be polite. Nobody, the old woman said too fast. Eat. You forget to eat. Sarah let it go, not because she was incurious, but because the kettle needed lifting and the sugar needed tapping loose, and the old woman needed to talk about saints that didn't visit anymore. She washed a pair of cups and listened to stories stitched out of smoke and bread. Later, in her own place, Sarah set the Rossi card on her dresser and watched it like it might hatch. On the back, in a hand that did not like being sloppy, a second number had been added. Different ink, not business, personal. She traced the digits, then snatched her finger back like the numbers were hot. She didn't want to belong to anybody's storm. Across town in a house built from stone and silence, Giovanni stood at his father's bedroom door, watching the rise and fall of Sal's chest. You're not the man who naps, he teased softly. I am 80, Sal replied without opening his eyes. And tonight, a girl reminded me I had a mother. Giovanni thought about that, about memory as a room someone else could open for you, about a waitress who moved like a solution to a problem he hadn't named. Don't bring her into this, Sal murmured as if he had read his son's mind by candlelight. I won't, Giovanni said, meaning it and already failing. Sleep. On his desk downstairs, the photograph Anthony had sent an hour earlier waited. A grainy frame grabbed from a camera across the alley. A motorcycle idled, the rider glancing up, not at the ballroom, but at the service corridor camera, knowing it was there. The face was masked, the eyes were not. Giovanni zoomed until the pixels begged for mercy. He didn't need the mouth to know the line of the cheek, the patience of the stare. Luca Carbone liked to knock without coming in. Giovanni's phone buzzed once, a message from a number he didn't recognize yet, and his pulse did something he disliked. It climbed the stairs of his throat without permission. Thank you for the ride, Sarah. He typed nothing back for a long minute because nothing back was safer medication than everything you want. When he finally answered, he used 12 careful words. If anything feels wrong tonight, call. I don't sleep easily anyway. Sarah read it with the light off as if secrecy could decrease the heat. She put the phone face down, crawled under the thin comforter, and told her heart to be quiet. It wasn't. At 2:12 a.m., a shadow paused on the sidewalk across from her building. Not a man. A shape built from patient cold. It didn't look up. It didn't need to. 2 blocks away, a cruiser idled, Detective Whitaker writing notes in a hand that never forgot. She tapped her pen against her lip and circled a name twice. Carbone. Then another name she had no reason to circle at all, Sarah Johnson. By dawn, the city would look washed and ordinary. By noon, the gala would clutter into a headline half-read over lunch. By night, something would break, and someone at the center of the ballroom's quiet would have to decide which world to keep breathing in. What did Sal really see in Sarah's greeting? And why did Luca choose that alley? Why did Mrs. Duca hide that summer photograph? And how many people already wrote Sarah's name into a ledger she can't see? Morning pretended last night hadn't happened. The sun polished downtown into something innocent. The papers called it a minor disturbance, and the Palmer House staff swept glass until the floor forgot. Sarah tied her apron at the bistro, the knot stiff, the espresso hiss fussy. Cities move on. Rent demands it. At 9:12 a.m., a motorcycle ghosted past the window. It didn't stop, just stained the air with attention. "Detective for you," her manager said, waving a card. Claire Whitaker crossed the room like a quiet verdict. Badge flash, small nod. "Sarah Johnson, you worked the Rossi Gala?" "Yes." "See anything unusual?" A tray, a bike, a room that froze when 4 Sicilian words lifted like steam from old kitchens. "A tray broke," Sarah said. "A bike backfired in the alley. That's all I saw. If anyone contacts you, you call me." Claire's gaze measured the tensile strength of Sarah's composure. "Don't try to be brave in other people's wars." "Brave isn't my thing," Sarah answered. "It becomes everyone's thing eventually," Claire said at the door, then paused. "Where did you learn Sarah? Buonasera?" "A neighbor," Sarah said. "Why?" "Because Sal Rossi hasn't smiled in public in years." The bell chimed Claire out as if punctuating a secret. Lunch thinned. Nina texted, "Are you in love with your own funeral?" Sarah pocketed the phone, finished her shift, buttoned her coat, stepped into a thin winter that made newspapers skitter like gray birds. 2 doors from the bistro, a black sedan slid from the curb and unrolled its window. "Get in," Giovanni said, his voice calm as if calm could be put on like a coat. "I'm not being collected," she said. A patrol car tore past, its sirens slicing the block. Half a length behind, a rider idled by a pawn shop, visor down, head tilted toward her reflection in the glass. He was counting. He didn't need to follow if she walked into his math. Sarah got in the car. Leather quieted. The city muted behind glass. Giovanni didn't scold. He looked annoyed at the physics of danger. "I told you to call if something felt wrong." "It felt wrong when your face appeared like a headline," she said. She looked back. The rider hadn't moved. "Who is he?" "Luca Carbone," Giovanni said, tasting winter metal. "He watched the staff entrance last night. He'll keep watching until I either notice or wish I hadn't." "I'm nobody," Sarah said. "Not the kind that goes unseen," he said. And the way he said it rejected the word nobody on principle. They dropped into an underground garage. An elevator rose without courtesy. The corridor wore quiet and good art. The apartment beyond held stone and light and money that had learned not to shout. No gold, no brag, just a kitchen with knives that could forgive human error. "Ground rules," Giovanni said, shrugging off his coat. "If you leave, tell me. Unknown numbers, don't answer. If you see a red dot, hit the floor. I prefer the second one." "Me too." He handed her water. Their fingers didn't touch. The absence felt louder than contact. "Who taught you to greet my father?" "Rosa Duca," Sarah said. "Moved into my building when I was 12. I carried groceries, learned cookies and prayers." "From where in Sicily?" "Calanacetta." A current passed under his face. He pulled a leather book from a drawer, flipped to a summer photograph. Girls with ribboned hair, sunlight making holes in the paper. A caption, "Rosa Duca, Santa Lucia Festival." My grandmother's village, Giovanni said softer. Rosa argued with my grandmother. Then he sang with her. He closed the book carefully. Your dialect wasn't just right. It was home. Do you get tired of being the man everyone watches? She asked. Constantly, he said, surprised at how easily the truth spilled out. I'm also the man who keeps them alive when they screw up. Footsteps echoed in the hall. Not the driver. A heavier silence descended. Anthony Marino appeared, bearing a white bakery bag, his smile as calculated as a peace treaty. Cannoli, he announced. Since you skip lunch when bullets are on the menu. You deliver pastries now? Giovanni inquired. I deliver whatever keeps your pulse from flatlining. Anthony retorted, his gaze swiftly assessing Sarah. Ms. Johnson, I'm Anthony. I manage birthdays and clean up messes. He offered her a cannoli. Carnations. Not as good as roses. The ricotta doesn't taste like regret. As Sarah reached for one, Anthony's eye flicked to the small burn scar on her knuckle. Every kitchen leaves its mark on you, she observed. Every world does. He glanced at Giovanni. We found the bike ditched under the L. Clean. Too clean. His way of sending flowers, Giovanni commented. Thorns and all. Anthony saluted with the pastry and vanished like a rumor. Sugar might steady Sarah's hands. The skyline postured, all harsh angles. A theater of consequences where she had a front row seat but no ticket. What happens after this afternoon? You go home, provided the patterns outside your building behave. If they don't, they learn to, Giovanni said. And if I say no? She asked. Then I escort you anyway and make the patterns like me. The knock that followed was soft, like an old neighbor's. Giovanni checked the camera, the peephole, old habits of caution dying hard. He opened the door, one hand instinctively behind it. An elderly woman brushed past his caution as if it were a piece of furniture. Figmea, Rosa Duca announced, her coat buttoned crookedly, her eyes sharp. She set a tin on the counter. I made too many. Take. Giovanni blinked, surprised. You know each other? In Sicily, everyone knows everyone, Rosa replied, inspecting him like a piece of bone china. You're taller than your mother said. Sarah hugged her, warmth blooming just under her sternum. You shouldn't be out. If someone wants me, they can wait in line, Rosa retorted, fishing a folded paper from her coat. I brought this. The letter had been faded by years but not erased. The handwriting was masculine, careful, the name at the top, Salvatore Rossi. Giovanni drew breath as if stepping into ice water. My aunt saved things, Rosa said. Your mother gave her this when men had to disappear quickly and promises had to travel even faster. She smoothed the paper on the stone counter. One day, a girl who says hello the right way would need to see it. Giovanni read aloud. Gratitude. Debt. A vow in a kitchen dusted with flour. If ever a duca needs shelter under our roof, my house is her house. My sons her servants before they are kings. Rossi. The apartment's hum seemed to shift key. Outside, a hawk stitched the wind between buildings. You understand? Rosa demanded, chin up. You are not doing her a favor. You are paying your debt. I understand, Giovanni said, and the sentence fit him like a suit his father had worn first. They ate like a family forged in the fires of circumstance. Coffee, cheese, and cookies shaped like memories. Giovanni recounted exactly one boyhood story. Rosa matched him with a tale of a fig-stealing dog. Sarah let the warmth seep into the place the city had kept cold. Her phone vibrated on the counter. Unknown number. 30 seconds of video. Don't, Giovanni warned. He unplugged the Wi-Fi and mirrored the phone to the monitor. Grainy footage from last night's alley. The tray of shattered glass, Sarah crouching to help the busboy. The camera zoomed in with unervingly human hands until her face filled the frame, then panned to the service door. A small chalk X glared white on the metal. Rosa crossed herself. Sarah's grip tightened on the counter's edge until her knuckles were white. Carbone's mark? She asked, her voice deliberately steady. Sometimes he signs his promises, Giovanni said, pausing the frame as if pressure could erase it. The monitor went black. The intercom buzzed, flat and insistent, the camera feed showing an empty lobby. A florist's ribbon adorned a cardboard box. The label was neat, addressed to Sarah. "No one touches it," Giovanni commanded into an unseen channel. "Clear the lobby. Drone, not hands. If it breathes, I want to hear lungs." Rosa slid her palm over Sarah's knuckles. "You are not afraid," she ordered. "You are smart. Be angry later." A message arrived, words this time. "Say hello back." Giovanni didn't reply. He looked at Sarah with the unwavering gaze of an engineer assessing a bridge he refused to let fail. "You're not going home tonight," he stated. "I have plants," she protested, the mind grasping at the trivial when the monumental threatened to drown it. "I'll water them," Giovanni offered. "Do you even own a plant?" "I own people who own plants," Giovanni said. Rosa snorted, then softened. "She stays, and you call your father." The apartment obeyed her cadence. Giovanni spoke Italian down a line that carried the weight of history. The intercom buzzed twice, Marco's code. Clear. The feed showed the ribbon box open on the lobby's polished floor. Inside, a metal music box nestled in tissue, the kind you wound with a small key. 2 words were engraved on the lid. Santa Lucia. Rosa's breath caught. "Your grandmother's song," she whispered. "We sang it when the lights went out." Giovanni's eyes went midnight dark. "Bring it up," he ordered. "Gloves, don't wind it." Moments later, the florist's box sat on the counter like a dare. Anthony reappeared, rain clinging to his shoulders, his smile useless now, his gaze fixed on the monitor where the chalk X lingered like a wound. "He's playing with your saints," Anthony said. Giovanni carefully lifted the lid. Beneath the velvet lay a square of paper folded once. 5 words written in a clean hand. "Who taught her to pray?" Rosa's jaw tightened. "Tell him a woman did," she declared, proud as banners. Giovanni slipped the note into his inner pocket, where vows went to rest. Giovanni's voice, cold and resolute, wrapped his command like wire. "We're done answering his questions." He turned to Sarah. The steel receded from his expression, leaving only decision. "Pack a bag. 1 night, maybe 2. You're coming to the house." "The house?" she echoed. "My father's," he said. "If Luca wants prayer, let him read the page where Salvatore Rossi keeps his promises." Sarah thought of the letter, of "My sons her servants before they are kings," of the writer counting through pawnshop glass, of Claire's card burning a polite square in her pocket. She nodded. 1 night, she promised. And both knew that promises were the city's most endangered species. She crossed his threshold later, carrying a toad of necessary things. A sweater, a toothbrush, the courage people packed without naming. The lake sky faltered into a bruised color. Men who watched these things noticed. Phones lit up. Patterns shifted. In another room 3 miles away and below ground, a man turned a tiny key once, twice, 3 times, and waited for a song. In a police sedan 2 blocks from Sarah's building, Detective Whitaker circled a name twice. Carbone and another she had no right to know yet, Sarah Johnson. In a bedroom of stone and silence, Sal Rossi sighed in his sleep, hearing in dreams a girl's voice say hello the way home does. And in a kitchen that had briefly felt like a truce, the music box on the counter kept its silence, its lid engraved with a saint who watches ships find harbor. What page from the Rossi past was Luca forcing them to read? And who else remembered the prayer Sarah didn't know she was saying? Why did the writer count instead of follow? And what happened to a promise when someone wound the wrong song? The Rossi mansion woke to the silence of power. Morning light slid across marble and steel, catching dust motes that looked like secrets too small to tell. Sarah stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing fruit, still wearing the borrowed sweater that smelled faintly of cedar and safety. Juro Figma. Sal Rossi's voice carried the smoke of decades. He leaned on his cane, radiating a dignity that needed no audience. "You greet like a Sicilian. Sounds like home." Sarah smiled. "Rosa taught me that." She said the right word can open a door. Giovanni entered, sleeves rolled up, eyes already assessing the world. He stopped at the sight of them, his father eating biscotti, the girl who'd changed the air in his house. For a second, something unguarded flickered through him. Sal looked up. Lunch at La Brezza on the lake. If the girl comes, you'll worry less. Giovanni's jaw tightened. It's not safe. Then make it safe, Sal said simply. And that was that. La Brezza was the kind of restaurant that pretended not to know who it served. Frosted windows, clean linen, soft music. Giovanni chose a seat by the wall, scanning every reflection. Sarah sat beside Sal, her quietness a thread holding the moment together. For a while there was peace. Sal told a story about fishing in Caltanissetta. Sarah laughed, and Giovanni found himself watching the curve of her lips instead of the door. Then something shifted. The light dimmed, not from clouds but from a shadow outside. A figure stood beyond the frosted glass. Still, deliberate. A small chalk X glared near the corner. Sarah saw it first. Her pulse tripped. She leaned toward Sal, whispering in Sicilian, "Nera ora, down now." The old man obeyed without question. Giovanni reacted in the same breath, pushing Sarah under the table and covering her with his body. He whispered against her hair, steady and low, "I've got you." It wasn't a command. It was a promise. Anthony's voice roared from somewhere distant. Orders, movement, the rhythm of chaos. But Giovanni didn't move until the silence turned real again. When he finally looked up, the entire window was gone, and the lake stared back like an open wound. Sal brushed glass off his sleeve, unshaken. "Everyone breathing?" Sarah nodded, though her hands trembled. Giovanni caught them and held them still. "You saved him," he said quietly. She blinked. "I just saw the shadow." "Before I did," he said, and that truth settled between them like heat. They left through the service exit, cops swarming the front, reporters shouting, cameras flashing. But Giovanni kept his father between himself and the chaos. Sarah close enough to feel his heartbeat. The moment they reached the car, he turned to her. "You stay with me," he said, "until I say otherwise. I can take care of myself." "You already did. Now it's my turn." Back at the Rossi estate, the walls felt higher, the light dimmer. Rosa opened the door before they reached it, scolding in Sicilian as if they'd come home late from school. She cupped Sarah's face, checked for cuts, then muttered a prayer halfway between anger and relief. "Sit," she ordered. "Both of you eat. Saints can't guard empty stomachs." Giovanni almost smiled, but didn't. He poured espresso, the act so ordinary it hurt. Then his phone buzzed. A new message. No text, just a 30-second video. He opened it on the counter screen. Grainy footage of La Brezza's shattered glass. The moment before the shot, Giovanni shielding Sarah, his hand covering her head. The video froze there, a frame of protection turned into art. Words appeared at the bottom. "Tell her to say it again." Rosa crossed herself. Sarah's breath hitched. Sal's eyes darkened with something ancient. Giovanni closed the screen, every muscle wired with control. "He's watching us, listening." "Who?" Sarah whispered. "Luca Carbone," he said. "And he just made it personal." She shook her head. "You can't fight a ghost." "I can," Giovanni said. "If the ghost threatens what's mine." He didn't mean it as a claim, but the words hung between them like a touch. Neither dared to name. Sarah looked away, her heart pounding too loudly. "You shouldn't say that." "Why?" "Because ghosts listen, too." Night fell fast over the lake. In the kitchen, the old music box still sat where they'd left it, its lid engraved with Santa Lucia. No one had dared wind it. They were talking quietly. Plans, security, escape routes, when the first note rose, soft, metallic. The melody played on its own. Sarah froze. Giovanni crossed the room, lifted the box with gloved fingers. The song continued, bright and haunting, the tune his grandmother had loved. On the underside, newly scratched into the metal, a mark gleamed white, a second X. Luca's signature, Giovanni murmured. Rosa's spoon fell from her hand. He's writing in your house now. The music wound down to silence. Only Sarah's breathing filled the space. Giovanni turned to her, his voice quiet, certain. You're not leaving this house tonight. I wasn't planning to, she said, and something inside both of them stopped running. He stepped closer, close enough that the fear in her chest turned into something warmer. His hand brushed a piece of glass from her hair. Slow, careful. When I said I'd keep you safe, he murmured. I didn't mean behind walls. I meant anywhere. She looked up at him, eyes wide. That's dangerous, Giovanni. He smiled, faint and tired. Everything worth keeping is. And from the corner of the room, unseen by both, the security camera light blinked red, recording every word. Who placed the second mark inside the Rossi home? And why does Luca Carbone know the song that only the Rossis and Rosa should remember? Night tasted like metal in the Rossi house, like keys and vows. After Librezza, they drifted into a tense orbit around the kitchen island. Rosa stirring sauce she never let boil. Sal passing opinions like salt. Giovanni turning silence into a strategy. Sarah pretending her hands were steady. The music box sat on a tray, lid closed, its tiny X, catching the light when no one wanted it to. The red pinprick of the ceiling camera blinked. A heartbeat you could miss if you weren't grieving for quiet. Giovanni noticed. He always noticed. Kill every indoor lens except the main hall, he told Marco. Hardline record only. No wireless. Anything with a battery lives in a drawer. Yes, sir. Sarah watched the dot die, felt her shoulders drop a fraction. I don't like being watched. Giovanni looked at her as if she'd uttered a sacred thing. Then we make a room no one can see into. He led her down the back corridor to a door that didn't advertise itself. Oak, plain, a brass plate that read storage. A fingertip to the jamb, and the panel slid into the wall to reveal a second door. The hinges whispered inside. A square of light, soundproof, air-filtered, stone-quiet, not a bunker, a chapel of safety. He didn't explain it. He just stepped in and let her feel the hush settle on her skin. If you can't find me, come here, he said. If you're scared, come here. If you're angry, come here first and then come find me. She turned, hair slipping its pin. What if you're the one who's scared? He almost smiled. I don't do that. Her brow lifted, he sighed. If I ever am, I'll meet you here. Then it's a pact, she said softly, and the room absorbed the word like bread drinks oil. They walked back slower than they'd left. The house had learned them in a day, memorized their footsteps and the way their voices found each other without searching. In the gallery, Sal stood studying an old photograph. Caltanissetta, a summer street, Rosa young, halfway laughing, a boy with storm in his eyes, not yet a king. My son will insist on walls, Sal said without looking over. That is his trade, but walls do not keep promises. People do. He glanced at Sarah, measuring something invisible. He keeps them. Do you? She felt the weight and stood under it. Yes. Good, Sal said, satisfied. Then you may stay, as if he were the one who had needed convincing. The quiet war began with small moves. Giovanni replaced the house phones with burners the size of matchboxes. One for each person, only one number saved on each. His. He had Sarah carry hers in the inner pocket of the cardigan Rosa insisted she borrow. For saints and drafts, the old woman said, tucking the wool around Sarah's shoulders like a blessing disguised as scolding. He showed Sarah the blind corners of the ground floor, the way reflections off the lake turned windows into one-way mirrors at dusk. He taught her the Rossi version of ordinary. Never walk the same route twice. Never let a door announce you. Never assume a quiet street. Say we're separated, he said. I need a word that means I come to you and kick down whatever stands between us. She thought of kitchens and glasses and chalk. Casa home. He nodded. And a word that means run. She didn't hesitate. Vento wind. Good. He paused. A word that means don't be a hero. She gazed at him until he looked away first. Giovanni. His mouth tilted, the concession of a man who had never been named a command before. They ate early. They ate together. Rosa fed them as if fullness could turn into armor. Claire Whitaker came by once, sleeves rolled, badge tucked, and left a single page on the counter. A warrant list for a camera vendor that had recently serviced half the good addresses on the lakefront. Wireless by default. She didn't linger. "You didn't get this from me," she said. "And I saw nothing on your counters except flour." Anthony's name crossed Sarah's mind like a shadow, a memory from that frozen moment at Librezza. The radio squawk that had said, "Marino." Giovanni never spoke it aloud. He watched Anthony the way a surgeon watches a perfectly beating heart that might still hide a splinter. "Trust what you can prove," Rosa murmured to Sarah, noticing what people pretended she didn't. "And keep kindness in your pocket. You never know when you will need to pay with it." "Is kindness currency here?" Sarah asked. "In every world," Rosa said. "But the exchange rate changes. At dusk, the lake bruised purple." Giovanni insisted on air. 10 minutes in the garden," he said. "Not the street. I control the hedges." She followed him through the conservatory where lemon trees wintered like visiting nobility. Outside, the path ran a modest curve between you and the stone that folded the estate from the world. The cold kissed her face. He walked close, not touching her, and she felt more protected than when bodyguards ringed a door. "Today taught me something," he said. "That you hate frosted glass. That I hate not seeing danger coming," he corrected. "And that you see it sooner than I do when it wears a face instead of a plan." She remembered the chalk on the window, the way her hands had moved before her mind. "Rosa taught me to read rooms. Poor women learn whose hands are empty, whose rings were pawned last week, who came to eat or to be seen eating, and which men are storms." Her smile was small. "You make the air change, not because you try, because you are who you are." A crow took off from the wall and spun the sky into black ribbon. He watched it go. "My world eats everything soft," he said. "It swallows, it calls it dessert, asks for seconds. It's not noble or glamorous. It is a thing that demands you know what you'll lose before you sit down at the table. I should send you away." "You tried," she said. "And then you put your body between me and glass." His jaw worked. "I'll do worse to the next thing that comes for you." "Then don't send me away," she said, simple as water. "Make room." He stopped. She did too. The hedge held its breath. "Stay," he said. "I already am." He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with the care of a man disarming a small bomb. He didn't kiss her. He didn't need to. The promise changed the night anyway. A motion at the far end of the garden. Marco lifting 2 fingers. "Time." They went back in through the warm lemon air into a house that felt marginally more like Casa and marginally less like a map of exits. The next move in the war arrived in a brown envelope pushed under the front gate. No courier. No camera caught the hand. Inside, a restaurant reservation printout for tomorrow. Librezza, 1:30 p.m. Sarah Banua, the email Luca had used to book the room the day before, and a second sheet. A floor plan of the Rossi ground floor annotated in neat, impersonal handwriting. Sarah stood with Giovanni over the island as he read. She watched his breath shorten and then lengthen on purpose. "He's seeding fear," she said. "He's itching for me to flinch," he said. "I won't give him the pleasure." "So, we go back to Librezza?" "We go somewhere else," he said. "And make him look foolish." Anthony arrived with a tablet and a face that had learned to be pleasant under floodlights. "Pulled every Seriabonu account within the last 72 hours, he said. 13 throwaways, all spun up from the same offshore block. He's mocking us with our own good taste." "Then we change the taste," Giovanni said. "Tomorrow. The Old South Pier, private pavilion, 1 entrance, 3 exits. He'll expect glass. We'll give him wood." Anthony's smile flickered. "Invitation list." "Family," Giovanni said, which in their dialect meant few. "Rosa, my father, Sarah." He didn't look at her when he said her name. The air had to carry the weight. "Security, unobtrusive," he said, "but absolute." He and Anthony measured each other for a long breath. The air thinned. Sarah felt the click of a lock she couldn't see. When Anthony left, his cologne lingered half a heartbeat after his shoes stopped speaking. "Do you believe in him?" she asked. "I believe in what we've built together," Giovanni said. "Belief and proof are cousins, not twins. And me? You?" He faced her fully, and whatever else was in the room folded its hands and listened. "I believe you are the first thing in years that makes me want to build something that doesn't require proof." Her eyes stung. "That sounds like a risk." "It is," he said, "and I am very good at risks." Rosa coughed a warning from the stove. "Eat your soup before it thinks you do not love it." They obeyed. Night concentric around the house in rings of light and guard routes. Sarah lay awake in the guest room whose window framed the lake like a promise larger than men's plans. The burner phone on her nightstand glowed a single stubborn dot. She touched the wool at her shoulder and thought of the words that had become their map. Casa, Vento, Giovanni. The dot blinked. A message. No number, just audio. She sat up, her pulse rising into her throat. She hesitated, then pressed play. A child's voice sang Santa Lucia. Not the version the box played. Not the church melody Rosa hummed. But the broken lullaby of a worn cassette. Birdsong over static. A hand clapping offbeat. Her own childhood. Her mother's accent. Not Sicilian. Not anything Giovanni would recognize. Cutting through the final syllables. "Sleep, Sarah. Sleep." The phone slipped in her grasp. Her mouth went completely dry. For a fleeting second, the room seemed to dissolve around her. There was only a cramped fourth-floor walk-up, a cheap summer fan that rattled and clacked, a woman's voice worn out but kind, then a second voice, a man's, deeper, with a smoothness that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up straight. "Not Giovanni. Tell him to make it sing again," the man said softly. "Tell him to use the key. Tell him we're listening." She was already on her feet before the message even finished. The burner phone felt hot in her hand, the carpet cold beneath her bare feet. She crossed the hall without putting on shoes. Giovanni's light still spilled out from under his door, because men like him don't often gift the darkness with their sleep. He opened the door before she even knocked, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, the weariness of long days etched onto his face like a roadmap. One look at her and everything about him shifted, adjusting to the exact shape of her alarm. "What is it?" She handed him the phone. He listened. His eyes didn't betray it, but his breath did. A fraction of a second shorter than normal. Sarah and harder hit, used the key. "How would he know that?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "My mother used to play that to drown out the sirens." He reached for her hand and held it tight. "We're not winding the box," he said. "He'll keep pushing," she whispered. "He wants to hear what you do when you're told. Then he'll just keep being disappointed." They walked together down the hall. The house seemed to learn a new route. In the kitchen, the music box sat exactly where it had been all day. Patient as a wolf, Giovanni didn't touch it. He examined the underside instead. At the X scratched where a maker's mark should have been, he took a quick photo. He sent it to a lab that owed him accuracy before air. "Rosa," Sarah asked. "Would she know something?" "Maybe," he said, "but I'm not waking her to share this kind of noise." He turned to find Sarah standing closer than the words he'd just spoken aloud. "Protection has its own gravity. Pulls you in and then it stops pretending it doesn't." He lifted a hand and cupped the back of her head like he had under glass, but softer this time, not driven by fear. Permission. She leaned in once, just a little, as if a world could tilt and somehow still not spill. He rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. "You're safe," he said. "While I breathe." "I believe you," she said, and her belief seemed to warm the air around them. The burner phone chimed again. "Unknown contact wants to airdrop a photo." Giovanni declined. The house hummed like a cat about to get into a fight. "Back to the quiet room," he said, not even asking. She nodded. In the small stone space, the silence settled around them like a third person. He took the only chair. She sat cross-legged on the rug. He handed her a blanket as if she'd asked for one and didn't even know it. "Tell me something true that isn't about fear," he said, his voice low. She thought for a moment. "I wanted to study languages." "You already do." "Not like this," she said, smiling despite herself. He told her one too. "When I was 10, my father taught me how to fillet a fish. He said the knife will only slip if you let your attention slip first." He looked at her intently. "I haven't let it slip since." "Maybe today you did," she whispered. "A little with me." "Maybe," he said, and no glass shattered. They might have slept there. They might have even invented sleep in a house that had forgotten the recipe. But outside the quiet room, in the kitchen that still held the echoes of women's hands and old men's opinions, someone knocked on the back door. Soft, domestic, the sound of a neighbor who needed sugar at midnight. Marco's radio crackled near the service entrance. Giovanni's body transformed from warmth to pure geometry. "Stay," he said, and hated the word even as he said it. She caught his sleeve. "Casa if you need me. Vento if I need you. Giovanni, if I'm about to do something stupid." He finished and left with a look that would have come back even if coming back were impossible. He reached the kitchen just as Marco flooded the yard with light. The silhouette beyond the glass wore a cap pulled low, hands visible, fingers splayed like a prayer. The camera feed came up on the counter screen, grainy, delayed. A man leaned into the frame. "Package for Sarah Johnson," he said, his voice muffled through the door. "From the florist." Rose's florist tied bows like rosaries. This ribbon was wrong, too slick, too bright. Giovanni signaled, "No one touches." A drone word from the pantry, ugly and useful, and nudged the box away from the threshold. It hit a seam in the slate floor and tilted. Inside, no roses, just paper and a phone the color of midnight. It lit itself. Sarah's number appeared on the screen. It was held up to the glass. Back in the quiet room, Sarah's burner phone chimed again. One photo received. She didn't open it. She whispered the code to the walls and waited for a footstep. The music box played softly from the kitchen. One single note like a test of faith. Giovanni didn't wind it. He didn't have to. The lid had shifted ever so slightly, the hinge glinting in the light. He lifted it with gloved fingers and saw no spring tines, no key twitch, only a sliver of thin wire, almost invisible, running from the underside to the counter's edge, disappearing into the seam near the camera conduit. "Not haunted," he murmured. "Wired." He traced the filament to the junction box and cut it clean. The wire went dead, and with it, the illusion that ghosts played saint songs. His relief lasted only a heartbeat. The phone inside the florist's box vibrated again, harder this time, like breathing. A text message crawled across the unlocked screen in white on black. He didn't touch it. He read, "Check your storage room." He didn't have to ask which one. He ran down the hall. The oak door that said storage stood where he'd left it. The hidden panel behind it had closed itself as it always did, seamless as a lie. He pressed it, and the wall yielded, and the quiet room opened like a held breath released. The chair sat where he'd left it. The blanket lay folded on the rug exactly as Sarah would have done. Sarah was not there. On the stone floor, her burner phone blinked one slow light, a patient star. And on the chair, placed with the gentleness of a hand that enjoyed its own restraint, sat the music box, its lid half open, the words Santa Lucia hidden in shadow. Who opened the quiet room without a key? And how did a man from the lake know the lullaby that only a mother and a girl should remember? Where did Sarah go in a house designed to keep her safe? And which door isn't a door at all? The house was too quiet. Quiet in the wrong key. Giovanni stood in the doorway of the storage room. Its walls still, the blanket folded, the music box gleaming half open under the dim light. Only the small burner phone on the floor blinked, a single blue pulse that made the shadows seem to breathe. "Sarah," he called once, his voice steady. No answer. He crossed the room in 2 strides, checked the corners, the vents, the hidden panel behind the supply cabinet. Nothing. Whoever had taken her hadn't broken any locks. They'd known which ones to whisper open. Marco burst in behind him. All gates sealed. Cameras looped for 90 seconds. Then blank. Clean job. Giovanni lifted the music box. Inside, a folded card rested against the gears. 5 words written in the same tidy hand that had mocked them before. Every promise has a price. He closed the lid slowly, his pulse louder than the hinge. Pull every vehicle tag within 5 miles, he ordered. I want heat maps, not guesses. Then, quieter, he took her. Sarah woke to motion. The hum of tires, the low rumble of an engine. The world outside the tinted window looked unfamiliar. An industrial stretch of Chicago she'd never seen, where the lake wind smelled like metal and distance. Her wrists weren't bound. Her fear was. Across from her sat Luca Carbone, younger than she'd expected, older than his smile. Black suit, no tie, fingers tapping against his knee in the rhythm of a song only he could hear. You speak Sicilian well, he said conversationally. Better than Giovanni does, I'd say. She stayed silent. He smiled wider. Don't worry, you're not a hostage. You're a mirror and Giovanni hates mirrors. The car turned down a pier road, headlights slicing through the mist. A small boathouse waited at the end, its windows flickering with lamplight. Luca gestured toward it. Our families once shared tables, bread, wine, secrets. Then his father decided he was king, and I decided I didn't believe in crowns. You're hurting him for history. I'm reminding him he's human, Luca said. And because you made him forget. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to something almost kind. Do you know what happens when a man like Giovanni loves? He hesitates. And when he hesitates, men like me win. Sarah's heart hammered in her throat, but her voice was steady. Maybe love isn't hesitation. Maybe it's courage that doesn't look like yours. Luca studied her face, curious rather than angry. Courage, he repeated. Tell me if you still call it that when he's the one bleeding. Giovanni's convoy sliced through the night. 3 cars, engines low, lights dimmed. His phone buzzed with updates, each one useless. No sight, no trace, no demand. The absence of a ransom was worse than a ransom. He looked out at the dark water. He's not hiding her. He's showing her something, he murmured. S stood by the window, leaning on his cane. What are you willing to pay, son? Anything but her. That's not how debts work, Gio, S replied. They take what you won't give. Giovanni turned. You taught me to build empires, not funerals. And yet every empire ends in one, S replied softly. Giovanni looked at the letter on the counter, the old promise between the Rossis and the Ducas, and felt its words like a chain and a compass at once. My sons her servants before they are kings. He reached for his gun, then stopped. Not like this, he said to himself. He wants war. I'll give him precision. At the boathouse, Sarah sat by the window while Luca poured wine. You think he's coming? He said. I know he is. He smirked. That's what ruins men. Faith. You don't believe in control, he said. In knowing the cost before you pay it. She met his gaze. Then you've already lost. You don't even know what love costs. For a heartbeat, something flickered in him. Recognition maybe of a truth he couldn't afford. He looked away. He'll trade something for you. He always does. And when he does, he'll see what loyalty really means. The door opened behind them. Giovanni stepped through it like a shadow becoming real. He wasn't supposed to find them that fast. He had followed patterns, phone pings, an intuition that had once saved his life. This time it saved hers. Luca raised his glass in a mock greeting. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten your manners. Giovanni's voice was a blade sheathed in calm. Let her go, and maybe you keep your fingers. Still pretending you're not the same as me? Luca asked. You build your kingdom on silence and pretend it's virtue. I simply speak out loud. Giovanni's gun never wavered. You mistake control for chaos. That's why you'll die looking surprised. Luca laughed softly. Maybe. But before I do, you'll have to choose which promise to break. Your father's or hers. He nodded towards Sarah. A camera in the corner blinked red. "This conversation is being recorded," Luca said. "Send it to the world." And the great Giovanni Rossi becomes what he's always been. A criminal with a pretty girl in his bed. "Don't send it. And I release her. But your father's life ends by morning." Sarah's voice was barely a breath. "Don't." He looked at her, every calculation dissolving. "Sarah, whatever he's threatening, it isn't me he wants. It's you broken." Giovanni took one step forward. "Then he gets neither." He fired once. The bullet shattered the camera, not Luca. Sparks burst. The red light died. The room smelled of cordite and fury. Luca's smile faltered. "You just chose her over your father," he said. "No," Giovanni replied. "I chose not to let you own the choice." He moved faster than Luca expected. Slammed him against the window frame, the gun clattering to the floor. "You want blood," Giovanni hissed. "You can drown in your own." Luca laughed through the pain. "And now she knows what you are." Giovanni looked at Sarah. Dust, fear, and grace in her eyes, and felt the truth burn. She did know, and she hadn't run. "Let's go," he said, his hand finding hers. She didn't ask if he'd killed Luca. She didn't need to. The lake outside was loud enough to bury anything. Back at the estate, Rosa waited by the door, praying in Sicilian under her breath. When she saw Sarah step out of the car, she crossed herself and hugged her so tightly that even fear had to wait its turn. Giovanni followed slower, his shirt torn, his face unreadable. Met his eyes, saw the decision already made there. "It's done," Giovanni said. Nodded. "Then you're no longer a prince, my son. You're a man." Sarah stood beside them, her hair tangled by the wind. He said, "Every promise has a price," she whispered. Giovanni looked at her. "Then I'll pay it. Even if it costs you everything?" He stepped closer, his voice low, unflinching. "Everything is nothing without you safe." The words broke something inside her and built something new in its place. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. Outside, dawn bruised the sky, the lake turning to gold. For the first time in years, the Rossi house exhaled. But from the garden gate, a shadow watched, someone in a gray coat, face unseen. When the light touched his shoes, a small white X gleamed on the ground beneath him. Who placed the final mark? And what promise still waits to be paid when the sun rises over the Rossi estate? Dawn reached the lake like a bandage pressed to a wound. The Rossi estate stood quiet, but not the wrong kind of quiet. This one had breath in it. In the kitchen, Rosa lit a burner and whispered a prayer that sounded suspiciously like an argument with God. In the hall, adjusted his cuff as if putting the world back on straight. On the island, the music box sat inside an evidence bag, its little X dulled by plastic. Giovanni hadn't slept. He'd watched the security feeds rewind and rewind until the 90-second blackout blurred. When the sun finally shouldered its way through the windows, he was still at the counter, his shirt from the night before open at the throat, his jaw rough with exhaustion and decisions. Sarah padded in barefoot, a cardigan pulled around her like a promise kept. Her hair was a gentle mess. She paused at the doorway and read the room the way she always did. The way Rosa's shoulders dropped when she saw her. The way S's chin lifted a fraction. "Good. You're unbroken." The way Giovanni's eyes softened before the rest of him remembered not to. "Buongiorno," she said. He exhaled like he'd been holding that word in for an hour. "How's your pulse?" "Borrowing steadiness from your coffee," she said, and it made him smile in spite of himself. Rosa slid a cup towards her. "Drink, then we fix what men broke." Tapped his cane once. "Begin with the person inside your walls." The room cooled. The suspicion that had been stalking the edges of the story stepped into the light. Giovanni's gaze cut to Anani's empty stool. The radio squawk from yesterday. The old file that had popped up on Claire's list. Marino. A name like a key in the wrong lock. "Claire's on her way," Giovanni said, his voice even. "And I already pulled the Rossi permits from 15 years back. There's a Marino on the vendor line." He slid a printout across the counter. Johnny Marino, camera installer, signed off on a hardline junction in this house, the one that feeds the storage wing. Sarah felt the floor tilt under the gentlest part of her foot. Anthony? She asked, hating the tremor wrapped around the name. Giovanni shook his head once. Sharp. Anani's full name is Antonio DeMarco Marino. He shortened it because our world turns names into targets. But Gianni Marino isn't his father. It's his uncle, a man he doesn't speak to. He tapped the permit and the signature on that file. It isn't Anani's handwriting. It matches the initials etched under the music box where the maker's mark should be. Rosa's spoon paused midair. The same hand put eyes in your walls and songs on your tables. The same hand Luca paid, S said. The door chime rang, 2 short pulses. Marco's code for a friend at the gate. A minute later, Claire Whitaker walked in with wind on her suit and purpose in her mouth. She took one look at Sarah and relaxed a notch, then slid a folder onto the counter like a card in a game both sides needed to win. Your ghost has a face, she said. We matched the scratch under the music box to initials on a run of lakefront installs. Vendor alias is GM, full name Gianni Marino. He used to subcontract for a camera company that lost its ethics before it lost its license. He's been living on pier cash since. Where is he? Giovanni asked. Claire's mouth tilted. He was found 2 hours ago under the Old South Pier. Not dead, not smart anymore. She looked at Giovanni. Someone beat me to him. Giovanni didn't blink. Not me. Didn't figure. She turned to Paige. He confessed to wiring a false failsafe across your quiet room. Could pop the panel and kill the feed for 90 seconds from outside. Said a client with winter eyes paid him to target the service corridor and the lake view at La Brezza. Winter eyes? Luca? Claire's gaze softened when it landed on Sarah. You okay? No, Sarah said honestly, then added. But I will be. That's the right order. Claire shifted back to business. We picked up Luca's car half a mile from a boathouse. No prints, but we did get a partial from the wine glass he used. He'll like how clean the warrant looks with his name spelled right. S's cane ticked once. Finish it. We will, Claire said. She hesitated. And Giovanni, if you want the part where the world still thinks you're respectable to survive, you need to give me one thing I can show on paper that says you tried not to be a monster today. He considered the old part of him, the one built from steel and shadow, and reached for evasion. The new part, which had learned Sarah's name as a direction, overruled it. He slid the evidence bag with the music box towards her. Vendor confession is yours, he said. So is the device he used to trigger that song. I'll testify who found it where. Claire took the bag like a priest receiving a relic. That'll do. Rosa harumphed. Good. Now leave. He needs to say something he has been carrying around his neck since he came home with broken glass in his hair. Claire's eyebrow arched amused. She's the only person I'm afraid of. She tipped 2 fingers in a mock salute and left with the morning. The house exhaled. Sarah's hands curled around the warm cup. Giovanni leaned his palms on the counter as if bracing himself against a map. For once, he didn't try to build a wall with words. I can't make you a safe world, he said. I don't want one, she said gently. I want a true one. He studied the surface of his coffee. When he looked up, his eyes were unarmored. When I put my hand over your head at La Brezza, I realized my life divides into before and after that moment. Before, I managed danger. After, I started managing what I couldn't stand to lose. Me, she breathed. The word was so small the room almost missed it. You, he said. If you ask me to soften, I will. If you ask me to step back from the part of the city that demands blood, I will carve us a different path. If you ask me to burn it down, He stopped. He was a man who never left sentences unfinished. It made the remaining words loom larger. Name the price. I'll pay it. She walked to him, her small bare feet across stone that had learned her tread in 2 days. I'm not a price, she said. I'm a person. You don't purchase my peace. You practice it. Rosa made a noise that was 90% approval, 10% restraint. S's mouth went soft in a way it hadn't in years. Sarah lifted a hand to Giovanni's face and touched the rough line of his jaw the way some people touch doorways on the way out. "Thank you. Keep me. Here is what I ask," she said. "You keep your promises like they're alive. You never lie to me about the cost. And when this house finishes rebuilding, you leave doors in it, ones people without bodyguards can walk through." "Done," he said, and the ease in his voice, the certainty, turned the next minute into something sacred. They were 3 inches apart, and history was ready to close the distance when Marco cleared his throat with a cough that belonged in an old church. "Forgive me, boss." He looked apologetic and not sorry at all. Ananis at the gate. Silence acquired teeth. Giovanni turned to the monitor. There he was, Anthony on the stone steps, hands empty, eyes tired, but not afraid to be seen. He looked up into the camera and oddly smiled the way you smile when you decide the knife won't go in your back today. "Let him in," Giovanni said. Anthony entered without theater. He stopped 3 paces inside the threshold and took in the room. Standing like weathered oak. Rosa, her spoon raised as if she'd knight someone with it if necessary. Sarah steady. Giovanni unarmed only in obvious ways. "I heard you found my uncle," Anthony said. And the word uncle held a night's worth of knives. "We found him," Giovanni said. "He signed our walls before you ever signed my payroll." Anthony exhaled through his nose. A small surrender. "He's the reason I sent my mother out of state last year. He came around after my father died, promised work, left chalk." His mouth twisted. He said, "The Rossis never look at the scaffolding that holds up their mirrors." "That's exactly where we're looking now," Giovanni said. Anthony nodded once. "Then here's my resignation." Rosa smacked the counter with her spoon so hard flour jumped. "Nonsense. You bring pastries when people try to shoot us. You do not run away because your family grew a bad limb." He looked at her the way city men look at old women who refuse to be impressed, like they find themselves in the realm of temporary gravity. His eyes shifted to Sarah, then back to Giovanni. "Keep me or cut me loose, but do it with the knife on the table, not by stabbing me in the back." Giovanni held his gaze for a long 3 beats, 1:16 and 16 seconds a.m. silence that measured the very depth of their friendship. Then, he walked over to Anani and, instead of taking the resignation, placed his hand firmly on Anani's shoulder. "I won't let Luca take another thing from me," he declared with conviction. "Especially not the people who prevent my worst impulses from becoming front-page news. Stay, but on one condition." Anani's smile returned, a little crooked, but undeniably genuine. "Name it," he said, eager to hear the terms. "You answer to her," Giovanni stated, indicating Sarah with a slight nod of his chin. "When it comes to rebuilding the house, she sets the boundaries that we, in our own home, will not cross." Anthony blinked. 1 hour 16 minutes and 48 seconds, then unexpectedly broke into a wide grin. "Finally, someone with decent taste is in charge around here." Sarah stifled a laugh, a feeling of warmth spreading through a part of her that had been cold for far too long. First line, she stated, "If it spies, it pays rent or it leaves." "Done," Anthony replied, and for the first time, his affirmation sounded like pure relief. Rebuilding a house isn't just a montage, it's a genuine ritual. They meticulously stripped the walls bare of the intrusive wires that had never been invited. Claire's team arrived, equipped with masks and gentle hands, carefully carrying the music 1 hour 17 minutes and 18 seconds box into a waiting van, treating it with the reverence of a dangerous hymn. Contractors were thoroughly vetted, constantly watched over, well-fed, and any hint of superficiality was replaced with enduring, solid craftsmanship. Blind corners were opened up and made visible. The windows were reinforced to let in light but keep out bullets. Sarah sketched a floor plan on butcher paper while Rosa dictated instructions in 2 languages, ensuring every detail was clear. A kitchen with a door that locks securely from the inside. Hallway mirrors strategically angled so the cook can see who's approaching. A bell at the service entrance that rings with a real, tangible sound, not just a cold, impersonal camera. S added 2 personal requirements. Chairs without any sharp edges, providing comfort for bad days, 1 hour 17 minutes and 53 seconds, and a bench placed by the lake, a sanctuary for good ones. Giovanni acted as if every line on that paper had arrived by official city ordinance, treating it with the utmost importance. They reserved the pavilion on the Old South Pier, but intentionally invited no one. On its freshly built wooden planks, they ate thick soup from thermoses, contentedly watching the tranquil movements of the water. Luca's men circled once, but couldn't quite explain why they suddenly felt foolish and out of place. By afternoon, the wind shifted, carrying the promise of rain that never materialized. On the second day, Sarah took Giovanni back to her building, not because it was necessarily safe, but because it was undeniably 1 hour 18 minutes and 24 seconds hers, a space that belonged solely to her. She watered her plants while he methodically changed the lock for the second time. Not because the first one was weak or faulty, but because men like him simply sleep a little easier knowing they were the last hands to secure a bolt, ensuring safety. Mrs. Duca scolded them both with a mixture of tears and freshly baked cookies. Upstairs, on a dusty shelf, Sarah discovered an old cassette tape labeled Santa Lucia S. Her mother's distinctive handwriting, the S elegantly drawn like a treble clef. She clutched the plastic close to her ribs, sharing with Giovanni a story devoid of villains. A tale of a woman who worked tirelessly through too many nights, singing too loud to drown out the 1 hour 18 minutes and 55 seconds wail of the distant sirens. He listened intently, as if her voice could still possess the power to silence those haunting sounds. "Keep it," he said softly, his voice filled with genuine emotion. "We'll digitize it, preserve it. I want our house to know your music, to be filled with your mother's voice, before it even knows our rules. Our house." The words fluttered in the air between them, slowly settling and taking root. On the third day, Claire called, delivering 3 sentences that shifted the very atmosphere of the city. "We have Luca, no bail, and your vendor sang." Her tone turned wry, laced with a hint of amusement. "Next time you feel the urge to do my job for me, at least send some cannoli as a thank you." Giovanni hung up the phone and turned to face Sarah. Rosa, 1 hour 19 minutes and 31 seconds and S, who were gathered in the kitchen, a space that now smelled less like fear and more like the comforting aromas of lemon and heat. "It's done," he announced, a sense of finality in his voice. Rosa quietly set down her spoon and crossed herself, a sigh escaping her lips that could extinguish the flickering flames of candles. S sank heavily into a chair, pointedly ignoring the way Giovanni's eyes shone with an unspoken emotion. Anthony arrived, bearing pastry and a grin that finally seemed to genuinely fit his face. Marco deliberately took the long way around the island, attempting to hide the smile that tugged at the corners of his mouth. They didn't celebrate with champagne and loud fanfare. They celebrated with a quiet but firm decision. Giovanni stood at the head of 1 hour 20 minutes and 2 seconds the table and, without any notes or seeking permission, dramatically changed the established rules. "No business conducted in rooms where children might sleep," he declared firmly. "No meetings held with anyone who considers a piece of chalk a valid signature. Every contract rescinded that was born out of fear and intimidation. We keep our city peaceful and quiet, without ever forgetting the people who inhabit it." He looked directly at Sarah when he finished, as if silently checking his calculations. She gave a single nod of approval, and something within his chest finally released a knot that had been held tight for years. "Say it," Rosa urged, waving her towel impatiently. "The thing you're holding back, swallowing down, because 1 hour 20 minutes and 36 seconds you're afraid that if you spit it out, it will somehow make you small." He turned to Sarah, and this time he didn't attempt to conceal the emotions that lived within his gaze. He stepped close enough that the history etched in their very bodies remembered the shattered glass, the sanctuary, and a kitchen that had learned the words to new prayers. "I love you," he said simply, the words hanging in the air with raw honesty. Silence didn't fall. Instead, it rose, swelling like a choir gathering its breath before a performance. Sarah's hand instinctively found the fabric of his shirt, holding on as if he were a sturdy railing in the face of an overwhelming horizon. Then keep me, she whispered, the words serving as both an answer 1 hour 21 minutes and 9 seconds and an undeniable challenge. He did what he had been yearning to do since the very first time she had greeted him with a hello that sounded like the promise of an opening door. He kissed her, not as an act of conquest or domination, but as a mutual agreement, a shared understanding. Rosa clapped once, clearly delighted by the unfolding scene. S muttered, her words laced with impatience. About time. A statement directed at no one who needed to be told. Anthony turned to the window, making a rather poor attempt at feigning interest in the serene view of the lake. Marco coughed into his fist, failing to completely hide the broad grin that stretched across his face. The kiss ended, but the promise it held did not. They carried dinner out to the bench by the water that S had 1 hour 21 minutes and 44 seconds adamantly demanded. The lake wore the colors of the sunset like a suit it didn't particularly deserve, yet it tried its best to embody its beauty. Boats stitched slow, deliberate lines along the distant horizon. The air tasted less like harsh metal and more like fragrant rosemary. A welcome change. Sarah rested her head comfortably on Giovanni's shoulder. Tell me something true that isn't about fear, she requested softly. He paused, considering his words carefully. When I was 10 years old, I believed my life would simply be a ledger. Debits, credits, pure survival. Today, I realized it has the potential to be a story. He turned the ring on her finger that wasn't physically there yet, but existed in the promise of the future. Making no apology for the future 1 hour 22 minutes and 18 seconds woven into his gentle touch. If you'll write it with me. She laughed softly, genuinely surprised by the ease with which the sound came from her. You don't write stories, you rebuild houses. Same thing if you do it right, he countered with a knowing smile. She tilted her face upward, her eyes meeting his. One more rule for the new house. Name it, she challenged. When women talk, men listen. He smiled, already happening. They watched the water gently transform into evening, the colors deepening and shifting. Behind them, the house they had reclaimed breathed, feeling like something undeniably alive. The intrusive camera lights remained dark, exactly where they should be. The bells rang only when Rosa wanted 1 hour 22 minutes and 56 seconds them to. Their sound intentional and purposeful. The kitchen radiated a warmth that comforted without scalding, a safe and welcoming space. On the stone pillar by the garden gate, someone had meticulously scrubbed away a thin white X until it was nothing more than a faint memory. Sarah ran her thumb over the smooth stone, feeling nothing but the cool, solid surface. Gone, she declared, a sense of closure in her voice. Replaced, Giovanni gently corrected, pulling a small stub of charcoal from his pocket, the same kind Rosa used to mark the bottoms of her cookie tins. He carefully pressed a mark beside the washed place. Not an X of negativity, but a small cross tilted like a sailor's charm, a symbol of hope and guidance. For saints that 1 hour 23 minutes and 30 seconds actually listen, he said softly, his voice filled with reverence. For promises that walk, she added, completing his thought, a shared understanding passing between them. They stood together in comfortable silence until the sky deepened into the color of good ink, a rich and profound hue. Somewhere in the sprawling city, a surveillance camera blinked once, then went permanently dead under a court order, its intrusive gaze silenced. Somewhere else, a weary woman securely locked her door and finally drifted into a peaceful sleep, free from fear. Back at the bench, the wind picked up, carrying a haunting tune that might have been a familiar church melody, or simply the vibrant imagination of people who had dared to decide to embrace a future. Sarah wasn't entirely sure, and for once in her life, she didn't feel the need to know for certain. Home, she whispered, the word filled with a profound sense of belonging. 1 hour 24 minutes and 3 seconds casa. He answered, the word resonating with shared meaning and warmth. And for the first time since a girl had uttered four quiet words in a crowded ballroom, words that had rippled through and stopped an entire city, the house, the lake, the man, and the woman, each in their own unique language and grammar, were finally in complete agreement. If you enjoy stories like this, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That's how I'll know you truly liked it. Even if you're watching on your TV, grab a second to join this family of fans who love emotional and heartfelt stories. Your support means everything, and it helps us bring you even more tales like 1 hour, 24 minutes, and 34 seconds this.